Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chav Gimel, Daf 23, Masechta Sukkah. Cool. Yeah. Okay, so we start with like a new Mishnah that discusses a sukkah on a boat or on a wagon. Okay. Also, we talk about making a sukkah on like an animal. And we talk about making using an animal for a wall for a sukkah. Cheba, what do you think? Should you use an animal for the wall of your sukkah? Anyways, so one thing that's interesting is that we're really just going to do like one amud because Chav Gimel Amud Beis is pretty small and there isn't like really a good stopping point. So I think we're just going to start at the top of Chav Gimel tomorrow because otherwise we're just going to have to repeat it tomorrow. I don't know. I feel like that's what happens, meaning if there's not a good stopping point so we can go weiter, but we're going to have to do it again tomorrow anyways. So, Alright, we're going to start on Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis at the Mishnah towards the bottom. Sukkahs bosha agola or bosha sfina. A fellow makes a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a boat. Sounds pretty fun. Anybody at Babylon Talmud ever made a sukkah on a wagon or a boat? I feel like it's not so common. Ksheira. So it's taka kosher sukkah v'odin la b'yom tov, and you can even go into the sukkah on Yom Tov as opposed to brosha ilan or agabe gomel. If you make a sukkah on top of a tree or on top of a camel, ksheira. So while the sukkah is kosher ve'in odin la b'yom tov, you can't go into it on Yom Tov because we don't go onto animals or into trees on Yom Tov. So while the sukkah itself might be a kosher sukkah, on Yom Tov you won't be able to go into the sukkah because animals and trees we avoid on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Shtayim bo'ilon v'achas b'dei odom. Okay, if you have a sukkah in a tree, like a tree house, and two of the walls of the sukkah are in the tree, but like one of the walls is like kind of coming down from the ground and goes all the way up and hits the tree, then one of the walls of the sukkah is like basically not built in the tree, but kind of built from the ground and going up to the tree. Basically the point is two of the walls are like in the tree and one of them is just like essentially kind of like a regular wall. Or if you have two like regular walls coming from the ground going all the way up to your tree sukkah, and one of the walls is mamish in the tree, so it's like built into the tree. So ksheir. So the sukkah is kosher ve'on la b'yom tov, but you won't be able to go into it on Yom Tov because you're going into a sukkah that's like supported by a tree. Shalosh b'dei adam v'achas ba'ilon. But if you have three of the walls are like man-made, and only one of them is like built into the tree. So ksheir ve'on la b'yom tov. So it's kosher, and you can climb into this tree sukkah on Yom Tov because at the end of the day, the three walls are man-made. Let's go right to for a second. This is the rule. Look, if you could remove the tree from the equation, and you'll still have a sukkah that's able to stand independent of the tree, so then it's kosher and you can go into it on Yom Tov, right? So if there are three of the walls are man-made, which means that you have a kosher sukkah without the tree. So therefore, the tree then becomes irrelevant, at least in terms of its necessity in being part of the sukkah, and therefore it's a kosher sukkah. And you can even go into it on Yom Tov because the tree isn't really contributing a significant contribution to the sukkah. Says the Gemara Mani Masnisin. Who is the author of our Mishnah? Who is the Tana who says that you are allowed to make a sukkah on top of a boat? So we say it's Taka Rabbi Akiva. The Tanya is within the Brisa. Also, Sukkahs bosha sfina. If a fellow makes a sukkah on top of a boat, Rabbi Gamliel says it's a pasul sukkah. Rabbi Akiva says it's a kosher sukkah. So therefore, if our Mishnah says that if our Mishnah says that if you make a sukkah on top of a wagon or a boat, it's taka kosher sukkah. So that is going to be Rabbi Akiva, who says that if you make a sukkah on top of a boat, it's taka kosher. There was a story with Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva shayubayim b'sfina, that they were taka traveling on a boat. Omer Rabbi Akiva v'asa sukkah b'rosh hasfina. Now Rabbi Akiva, so they're on a boat. Rabbi Akiva decided he was going to build the sukkah on the boat. And the next day, sure enough, a wind came and blew away Rabbi Akiva's sukkah. And Rabbi Gamliel says to Rabbi Akiva, hey Akiva, where's your fancy sukkah? Rabbi Akiva says that you can build a sukkah on a boat. Rabbi Gamliel says you don't build a sukkah on a boat. Rabbi Akiva decided, well, I'm going to build a sukkah on a boat. His sukkah blew away, and Rabbi Gamliel says, hey, you see, where's your fancy sukkah that you built? So, alright, very nice. So that's the machlokas. Amar Abai says, Abai d'chuli amo, enu yichol lahamod b'rach mitzuya di abasha lo klumi. Now, Abai, it says Abai in explaining this machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Gamliel, that look, if a sukkah is unable to even stand up to an ordinary wind on sort of dry land on the ground, then forget it. It's not even a temporary sukkah. It's nothing. If it's unable to stand even by a basic dry land wind, then it's going to be a pasul sukkah. And if the sukkah is able to stand up to a wind on dry land that is eina mitzuya, it's like it's an unordinary wind, it's a particularly strong wind, right? If the sukkah is able to stand up to a strong wind on the dry land, well then that's certainly a kosher sukkah. Where they argue is when a sukkah is able to stand by an ordinary wind on dry land, but it's unable to stand up to a regular sea wind, which is basically the equivalent, as Rashi says, of a ruach she'eina mitzuya b'yabasha. So, meaning, if the sukkah is unable to stand even by an ordinary dry land wind, certainly it's not a good sukkah. If it is able to stand by a ruach she'eina mitzuya b'yabasha, everyone agrees that it's a kosher sukkah. Where they argue is when it's able to stand up to an ordinary wind but unable to stand up to an unordinary wind. Now, an unordinary dry land wind is the equivalent of a regular sea wind. So, in that case, when it's able to stand by an ordinary wind but unable to stand to an unordinary wind, so that's where we have machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel savar sukkah diras keva ba'inon kevin de'en yichol lam l'brach mitzuya diyam lo klum hi. Rabbi Gamliel says, look, a sukkah needs to be a diras keva, and in order for it to be a diras keva, it has to be able to stand even by an unordinary dry land wind, which is the equivalent of an ordinary sea wind. Rabbi Akiva savar, whereas Rabbi Akiva holds sukkah diras arai ba'inon, whereas Rabbi Akiva says no, a sukkah just needs to be a temporary structure. As long as it could stand to a regular dry land wind, that suffices as a sukkah. And even if it's unable to stand to an unordinary dry land wind, which is the equivalent of a ordinary sea wind, nonetheless it is kosher according to Rabbi Akiva. Sounds pretty fun to me. Okay, now the Mishnah says that if you make a sukkah on top of a camel, so it's taka kosher sukkah. Now you can't go into it on Yom Tov because we don't ride animals on Yom Tov; they're muktzeh. But the sukkah itself is kosher l'maaseh. Masnis Imani, who is the author of our Mishnah? Reb Meir. The author of our Mishnah is Reb Meir. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, also sukkah al gabi behema. A fellow makes a sukkah on top of an animal. Reb Meir machshir, Reb Yehuda posel. Reb Meir says it's a kosher sukkah on top of an animal. Rabbi Yehuda says it's a pasul sukkah. So therefore, our Mishnah that says that you're allowed to make a sukkah on top of an animal, on top of a camel, so it must be Reb Meir who says that you're allowed to make a sukkah on top of an animal. My time is Reb Yehuda. How come Reb Yehuda says that you're not allowed to make a sukkah on top of an animal? On my crow. Well, the pasuk says, Sukkahs taisa l'cha shivas yom, that make for yourself sukkah, essentially, right? The Sukkahs taisa l'cha, make for yourself the festival of Sukkahs, make for yourself a sukkah, essentially. Shivas yom, for 7 days. Sukkah ru'uya l'shiva shma sukkah, she'en ru'uya l'shiva lo shma sukkah. A sukkah that you can use for 7 days is a sukkah. If you can't use it for 7 days, it's not a sukkah. And therefore, so Rabbi Yehuda says, the sukkah needs to be a sukkah that's usable for all 7 days. Now, when you make a sukkah on top of an animal, it's not usable for all 7 days because on Yom Tiv, the animal is muksa. And therefore, you're not going to be able to go into your sukkah. So therefore, memele, it's not a sukkah that's usable for all 7 days of sukkahs. And therefore, it's not a kosher sukkah. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. For Reb Meir, says Reb Meir, Hanami midaraisa mechze chazia, v'rabbananu tigazuba. Says Reb Meir argues, midoraisa, you can go into this sukkah for all 7 days of sukkahs. Midrabanan, the rabbis don't want you using animals on Yom Tiv. So because of midrabanan, we don't go into it on Yom Tiv. But in terms of is it a kosher sukkah? You bet it is. Midoraisa, there's nothing wrong with using this sukkah all 7 days. So therefore it's a kosher sukkah. Now, it's true that midrabanan, we're not going to want you to go into the sukkah on Yom Tiv. But the sukkah itself is a kosher sukkah. I saw libhema dof in the sukkah. What if one of your walls is pashit, a cow? Reb Meir posel, Reb Yehuda machshir. Reb Meir says that's not allowed. It's pasul. Reb Yehuda says it's fine. It's kosher. Shari Reb Meir omer, because Reb Meir would say, anything that is alive, in osin dof in the sukkah, you don't use it as a wall for a sukkah. For lechi lemavui, you also don't use it as a lechi and a mavui. V'lo pas in the beiros, you don't use it for those diomdin, for those like L-shaped wall corner thingies by the water holes. The diomdin, the pasid beiros, eruvin. V'lo lekever, it's also not the lid of a coffin. All right. I guess like the lid of a coffin becomes like tummy and stuff, so that doesn't apply to something that's alive. Okay? They said the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili Afein Kosvin Olav Gitei Nashim. You also can't write a divorce document on an animal and then like send it to your wife. Okay? Just like write it on paper, I guess. My time to Reb Meir. How come Reb Meir says that you're not allowed to use an animal for the wall of a sukkah? Abaye Omar Shema Tamus. Abaye says, well, what if the animal dies? Reb Zera Omar Shema Tivrach. Reb Zera says, well, what if it runs away? Bepilkoshu kuli ama lo pligeti inami mayis yesh benivlaso. So Yud. So again, bepilkosher, when it comes to let's say you want to use for your wall of your sukkah a elephant. An elephant is a very big animal. So, if you have an elephant and it's tied up well enough that it won't be able to run away, so kuli amalo pligate, everyone agrees that it'll be a kosher wall for a sukkah because it's tied up, so it's not going anywhere. So Reb Zera is concerned about maybe it'll run away is not a thing. The inami mayas, and even if it dies, yesh benivlaso yud. Even if it dies and collapses onto the floor, because an elephant is so big, you're still going to have a 10 tefach high wall. Where Reb Zera and Abaye argue is by a elephant that is not tied up. So according to Abaye, who says that the Reb Meir would be concerned with the animal dying, well, that's not an issue over here because it's an elephant. So even if it dies, it's still going to be 10 tefachim. But according to Reb Zera, who's concerned that maybe the animal is going to run away, but we have to be concerned that this elephant may not want to be the wall of your sukkah and might run away. But 1 second, according to Abaye, who's concerned that maybe the elephant will die, and in this case it's not an issue because the elephant will still be 10 tfachim, but if it's not tied up, shouldn't he be concerned that it's going to run away? No, so rather, it's true. If you have a elephant that is not tied up, even Abaye would say, yeah, right, it might run away, and that would be a problem. Where they argue is by a regular animal, not just a cow, that is tied up. So according to Abaye, who's concerned that it might die, yeah, it's an issue because the cow won't necessarily be 10 tfachim. And therefore, if it dies, you won't have a wall. But according to Reb Zeir, who says that we're concerned about the animal running away, that's not a concern here because it's tied up. But according to Reb Zeir, who's concerned about it running away, and in this case it's not a concern because the animal's tied up, but shouldn't he be concerned that maybe it'll drop dead? Why is he not concerned that it's going to drop dead? But where am I? So misa lo shchicha. So Reb Zeir would say, it's not so common that an animal is just going to drop dead, and therefore Reb Zeir says that as long as it's tied up, we're not concerned it's going to run away. But still, how could an animal be a good wall? There's like the space between its legs that is just space. So the avalei behutza v'dafna, you fill in, oh my gosh, that does not sound very fun for the animal. Basically take a cow, tie it up for a week, and between its legs stick like boards and stuff so that it's filled in. Why not just use the boards without the cow? I guess, I imagine it's probably theoretical. So you fill in the space with like boards and stuff. V'dilma rava, but what happens if it like slouches? It gets tired eventually and starts slouching, and now it's not 10 tfachim. The mesicha ba'ashli mi'el. Well, you tie it with ropes above so even if it slouches, you'll keep it up. But according to Abaye, who's concerned that the animal might die, why should he be concerned the animal might die? Just tie it with ropes so that even if it does die, the ropes will be holding it up, and you'll still have your 10 tefach wall. Zimnin demukim b'pachos mishlosha samuch l'schach. V'cheven demaisa kavtza v'lavadaite. So the Gemara answers, well, what if the sukkah is 10 tfachim tall, and you're using an animal that is slightly more than 7 tfachim tall, and you're relying upon it being lavud to say that it's 10 tfachim tall, and then if the animal dies, it might slouch, and even if you have the ropes to hold it up, it still might be less than, it still now might have a space that's 3 tfachim or more, in which case you can no longer say lavud, and then the wall won't be good anymore. So therefore, according to Abaye, who's concerned that the animal might die, it's going to be a problem, because even if you hold it up with ropes and stuff, it's not really going to work. Cheved, that was Daf Chav Gimel. We're going to stop here because, it's pretty much the top line of Chav Gimel Amud Beis, but again, Chav Gimel Amud Beis is pretty small, and it's just like, it really just continues like straight into the next page. So if we do it now, we're just going to have to repeat it tomorrow. So let's stop here. Cheved, that was Daf Chav Gimel, Masechta Sukkah. So, essentially, it wasn't a particularly complicated daf, and we just had like a few quick sugas with some pretty straightforward machlokases. So we discussed making a sukkah on a boat. Rabbi Kiva says it's a kosher sukkah, and Rabbi Gamliel says it's a pasul sukkah. And ultimately, it has to do with their opinions on sukkah diras keva ba'inon versus sukkah diras arai ba'inon. According to Rabbi Gamliel, it has to be a sukkah. So first of all, the Abaye explained the machlokas and says, look, if the sukkah is unable to stand even by just an ordinary dry land wind, so then clearly it is a pasul sukkah. And if it's able to stand up to a ruach she'ena matzuyin, an ordinarily strong wind on the dry land, well then everybody agrees that it's going to be a kosher sukkah. Where they argue is when the sukkah is able to stand up to a regular dry land wind, but not to a an extraordinary, an unusually strong dry land wind, which is the same thing as a regular sea wind. Rabbi Gamliel says, look, a sukkah needs to be a permanent structure, and therefore it's going to be pasul. Rabbi Akiva says that the sukkah needs to be just a temporary structure, and that will be kosher. Building a sukkah on an animal. So the Mishnah had said that it's a kosher sukkah, you just can't go into it on Yom Tov. The Gemara says that is Reb Meir's opinion. Reb Yehuda would say that it is a pasul sukkah. And we explain because, well, the pasuk says, you have to make a sukkah that is usable for all 7 days. So Reb Meir says, Reb Yehuda says that since you wouldn't be able to use this sukkah for all 7 days, because midrabanan, you don't go into a sukkah on Yom Tov, so you can really only use it for 6 days. So therefore, a sukkah on an animal is a pasul sukkah. Reb Meir says, yeah, look, but midoraisa, so midrabanan, we don't go into the sukkah on Yom Tov because we don't use animals. But midoraisa, there's nothing wrong with this sukkah. It's a kosher sukkah, and therefore, says Reb Meir, it's fine. It will be a sukkah on an animal is a kosher sukkah. Then we discussed using an animal mamash as the wall of a sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda has no problem with that, and he says it's kosher. Reb Meir says that it's pasul. We saw machlokas between Abaye and Reb Zera about why Reb Meir says that it's pasul. Abaye says, Reb Meir says that it's pasul because it might die and then collapse. You don't have a 10 tefach wall anymore. Reb Zera says they were concerned that it might run away. If it runs away, then you don't have your wall anymore. That was the Chaf Gimel of Masechta Sukkah. I hope you enjoyed. Cheers.